guys, welcome back to the Discipline Life Podcast, the place where we talk all about power differential relationships and domestic discipline. I'm Arya, and this is my husband, Coda.
Hello, everyone.
On today's podcast, we are somewhat continuing the topic that we talked about last week. And last week, our topic was all about submission and how submission doesn't have a universal presentation. And this week, we're going to be kind of continuing that topic a little bit and talk more about submission as, you know, this misnomer that submission has to be silent, right? I see that a lot in online spaces where there is kind of this misunderstanding about submission within domestic discipline and how there's almost this expectation, an unrealistic expectation in my opinion, that submission has to or is silent within the dynamic. So,
and would you go as far as to say that not only is submission looked at as silent, but also submission doesn't have a say?
right.
Like you just go along for the ride. You're not allowed to interject, different things like that. Would you say that that's something that you see a lot as well?
Right. And so, we talk a lot about, and we have talked a lot about, when you're first starting your dynamic, you come together, you have this conversation, you have mutual consent, you agree to the rules. But then there's almost this expectation that after that initial conversation, after initially setting up those rules, that the submissive partner then no longer gets a say within the dynamic. And they don't get to self-advocate, and they don't get to speak up.
Yeah, and I think that you brought that's the first point that you brought up is really, really good, because through our whole time in this domestic discipline realm, if you will, and in our relationship, there has never been a moment, and correct me if you think that I'm wrong, but I don't believe there's ever been a moment, even after we've agreed upon rules, even after we've started doing maintenance, spankings, and punishments, where there hasn't been a time where not every single time, but once in a while, where you have come and said, hey, I really think we need to reevaluate. I think we need to change some things. I think some rules that we thought were working aren't working. I don't know. I think we need to either up or lower the maintenance spankings, all these kind of things. And that's you as the submissive partner abdicating for yourself. And so that's a perfect example of, even when you begin on this journey of domestic discipline, that the submissive partner still has a say in every area.
And it's not absurding the head of household's authority to speak up and advocate for yourself, as long as it's done in a way that is respectful, authentic to your relationship, that is a agreed upon communication style within your relationship. I never come to Coda and talk about, I'm just not happy here. I present it in a way that it's like, hey, there's some things I think could work better. Can we talk about that?
No, you never had. In fact, I would go as far as say, you have done a really good job of never presenting that from a point of view of disrespect. Mm-hmm. You have always come with the submission that we just talked about. I hesitate to use meekness, because it can be looked at as the word mousy that we used last time. But really, you come very humble. There's the word. Very humble and respectful, and never as in you're not doing this right or this and that. And I think that's the difference there, is also the approach that can be taken.
Absolutely. And so, just to state our standpoint very clearly on this. We do not view submission as silent or passive.
If you couldn't tell from the episode last week.
And so we really do view submission is one half of a ongoing conversation, an ongoing exchange within a relationship. I think that anytime we start to rest in our roles and stop putting in that active effort, then we stop seeing growth. And the reason why we do domestic discipline, and a lot of the feedback we get from people that we've talked to that are in active domestic discipline relationships, part of the allure of this dynamic is that ongoing relationship growth and the deepening of communication, connection, and really the polarity of dominance and submission within domestic discipline, the authority and leadership that the head of household offers, the submission and service that the submissive partner offers, those all work together and they take active, ongoing effort. It shouldn't feel burdensome. It shouldn't feel hard, but it does take active effort. And so I feel like if submission was, meek, mild, passive, silent, that's almost resting in that role and hindering the growth.
I would agree. And I, just to come back just a little bit, to say also one of the reasons that we're speaking about this is I can tell you when we first got into domestic discipline, or Aria came to me and said, hey, this is something that I think would be really good for our relationship, there wasn't a whole lot out there for me to look at. And so some of the things that I was looking at were very much people saying, this is going to be abusive to your spouse. This is going to make it to where they have no say. This is going to take away their ability to be their own person. You name it. You've probably heard the excuses out there. It was out there. So I was hesitant at first, but I thought, no, ours doesn't have to look that way. As we talked a little bit more, I felt a little better with it. And obviously we've shown that our relationship has been better for that. But obviously the reason for this episode is so that if those of you are having issues and you're worried about all of this and you haven't found information out there, this podcast can be helpful in that way.
And would you say that, like, when you were first searching for resources and you were trying to see what the roles of a head of household and a submissive partner, what those roles looked like, you had one of two options? This was the research that I found too, is my relationship was a domestic discipline relationship and it became abusive, or it was just inherently abusive, and I escaped that and now I'm spreading the word on how horrible this is. Or on the flip side, you had the pro-domestic discipline stance where it was like, you just need to assert your authority and she doesn't get a say so, it's your right as a husband to do this in your relationship.
That's definitely what it was. That's why it was so hard to figure out whether or not this would be a good thing for us, because you just like what you get with anything, you look up any subject, I don't care what it is, you're going to get these huge polar extremes. And so it wasn't until I thought, well, I don't think she's over here, but I don't think she's over here either. So there's got to be a middle ground here somewhere. And so obviously that's where our conversations came in. And I realized, oh, okay, it's not you're seen and not heard. You wait on me hand and foot. I get to do whatever I want when I want to do it. Or the other side of, well, this, I'm sort of in charge, but really at the end of the day, this is just another way for you to take dominance over me, which is what the other side was trying to say about this. And so once we had those conversations, though, I realized, no, there is a middle ground where she still gets her individualism. Is that a word?
Yes.
Okay, individualism. And sometimes I make up words. She still gets to have a say. She still gets to agree and to have input. But this empowers me to be able to lead my family in the ways that I want to lead. If there is a tie vote, as we say, I get 2. But it also allows Arya to feel safe, to feel secure, to feel like somebody is in her camp, helping her achieve her goals. And it is helping me when she's succeeding in those areas that she wants to succeed. It actually helps me because what I realize is then she's happier. Then she is less has less anxiety. She is able to think clearer. All of those different things, and all of those things help me because it eliminates a lot of problems. And however, where obviously I was worried, but this is the middle ground is that, well, it seems like people are saying, well, then she never tells you what's wrong. She never tells you, they're not allowed to speak up. And no, that's not the case. She will come to me and confide in me and let me know where things are not working and where they are working, where there are things that I personally need to get better, or where the relationship, where we need to tweak things so that things can be a lot better. And so once I understood that, it was like, oh, okay, that's what needs to happen.
And I think one of the reasons we wanted to talk on this too is not only to continue the conversation from last week about the different ways that submission can look within a relationship, but also that we had a hard time, I feel like, for a while trying to figure out where those boundaries were and what really worked in our relationship, and having what's the word I'm looking for? Like the reassurance that what we were doing was okay.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. The first thing was for us to say, hey, this is okay. Because this is our relationship. And so for those of you who are listening and watching out there, and it's okay for you because it's your relationship. But yeah, at first it was definitely like, well, nobody's really doing this. Is this right? Is this wrong?
And I felt like I was kind of trying to figure out my position because up until that point, we had a lot of conversation, a lot of me presenting information to you because I was doing all the online research.
She definitely had the more research at that point. I had no idea what she was talking about.
And so I was bringing information to you, presenting it to you, letting you read it for yourself. You were then taking that and doing further research. So it wasn't that you were passive in finding information for yourself.
No, but I mean, someone had to bring it to me and sort of showed me where to look a little bit.
And so I was taking on more of that active role of like, here's the information. And then once we started this dynamic, once we decided, yes, we're going to do this, I then was like, is it appropriate anymore for me to bring information to you? Should I be more meek? Should I stop communicating? And we ran into some issues in the beginning because I kind of pulled back on my communication, and I was like, okay, I just need to be okay with whatever he's doing, even if I really didn't feel right to me. And then that frustrated you because you weren't getting that feedback from me to say, yes, this works. No, it doesn't. Or this is how I'm feeling about this. I wasn't giving you any of that information, and it really was hurting the process of us furthering our domestic discipline relationship.
Yeah, because as I said in the podcast last week, I want her feedback on things. I want her to talk to me. And the hardest part about this is that because we only had the two extremes, and of course we didn't want to go to where it was really weird over here, so we thought, well, maybe this is the one that it looks like, but it didn't work because I was getting zero feedback. And to a certain extent, correct me if I'm wrong, you kind of had this feeling of, okay, I just need to follow his lead, but it was hard for you when you thought that potentially I was about to head down a bad road, maybe, but you felt like you couldn't say anything.
Well, and I think because, again, we were living in, our information sources were these extremes, you were erring on the side of caution because you did not want this to ruin our relationship. You did not want this to become an excuse for abuse to exist within our relationship. You were very, very aware of the potential for those things to happen. You were also very cautious about that. And so you erred on the side of caution. You took it very slow. You were a lot, I don't want to use the word lenient because
it's probably an okay word to use because I think
I
I
don't
kind of
know.
was, but
I don't know if that's the best descriptor, but you were very
trepidatious, maybe?
Perhaps. I was going to say light-handed in the discipline.
That's probably okay too.
Because you were, and I wasn't giving you the feedback to say, hey, I really appreciate that you are committed to giving this a try, but this approach is not giving the process the proper
proper result that you were wanting.
We'll go with that because
Okay.
I can't think of a better word. But because I was like, okay, I just have to trust his leadership. I have to trust his decision making. I have to trust his judgment in this area. I was like, okay, even though this discipline is not effective to, because I was reading online, like discipline should be to the point where you don't want to repeat it. And I was like, well, we're not there. Like
we definitely were not there at that place.
And so I was like, well, this really isn't effective in that way, but I need to just accept it and I need to make it that way in my mind. And I wasn't giving you the feedback to say, hey, look, like we can go a lot further with this and it can be better, because I didn't think that that was my place.
Right.
And I mean, gosh, we had not that we had like, we weren't arguing. We weren't.
Or knockout, drag out fight.
No,
kind
not
of
at all.
Right.
Not at all. But we went through a rough start at our domestic discipline because there wasn't that continuous feedback loop.
Yes. Yeah. And what I was going to say was where I was stuck was there was, because we had taken that approach of you just do what I say kind of thing. I was frustrated because I'm going, no, there is a certain amount of feedback I'm not getting. And it wasn't like I was saying, hey, you need to be seen and not heard. She just automatically took that approach because she thought that that's the way it was supposed to be. But my frustration came when, look, I need you to tell me some of these things because I don't see everything. That's the whole point of having two in a relationship.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but did you think that your discipline was effective at that point?
No, and that was the other thing that was also frustrating for me is I was trying to figure out, okay, how do I make discipline be effective? But also I was so worried about going too far to where it was abusive, to where it was not effective at all, right? It's that old thing of potentially someone who is so afraid of X, whatever that might be, that they just choose not to do anything. And that's kind of where I was. I was like, I'm so afraid to go over this line because I'm not getting feedback of where that line is. And that wasn't her fault. That's just where we were at the time, that I was like, I don't even know where to go, so I'm not even going to throw a punch. If I don't know where to throw it, I'm not even going to throw one.
And that led to, and I want to kind of touch on 2 points here. But that led to a few different issues. One of those issues being that instead of having mature communication, direct communication, and having a conversation to voice my needs and voice my concerns and just voice my feedback in a mature and respectful way, it turned into, unintentionally, those first few months especially, where I would get in trouble, I would need the discipline, and then I would push back and intentionally like try to agitate you during discipline so that you would go further, you would go harder, you would.
And I didn't realize that at the time, and so, oh gosh, that made it hard.
It was frustrating on
Good
both
word.
of our parts.
Oh yeah, it was.
It was
terrible.
It was not mature. It was not effective as far as like, I didn't get what I wanted. You just got frustrated.
Yep, absolutely.
And to an extent, I think that there were a few times where you, at least, and potentially me too, questioned if this was the right dynamic for us, because it started to
definitely
affect our relationship negatively more than it was affecting it positively. And we went into this to have a better relationship, not to create more problems for ourselves.
I felt, and I think you remember this in the conversation, I felt overwhelmed. Like, I was like, the last thing I needed was another job to do, and that's exactly how I felt. Like, it was not from a place of, hey, this is going to make our relationship better, I'm being a servant, I'm serving my wife. It was from like, oh, this is just one more thing that I have to do on my long list of things that I don't want to do, but I have to do. And that's what kind of hurt our relationship as well, because then when you have that mentality, you start to look at her as an obligation. And that's never good when you start to look at your spouse as an obligation.
And so this like fallacy of like topping from the bottom, you're not topping from the bottom, whatever that even means. You're not doing that when you offer direct communication, when you offer feedback, and when you have an honest conversation in a respectful, appropriate way. That is just the relationship aspect, right? Topping from the bottom is what I was doing in the early days, where it's like, I need more, but instead of just saying that, instead of saying, this is where I'm at and this is how I'm feeling about it, I'm going to then get in trouble on purpose, try to manipulate the discipline to get what I want. And that, again, that is really bad relationship practice. It's really bad domestic discipline practice. It's not where my headspace should have been as a submissive partner at all. And it definitely did not create the polarity and the leadership and the authority that we wanted to accomplish.
And I used this in one of our very, very early podcasts, this analogy of, it's a sports analogy, and she knows I love sports analogies, but of a head coach of a football team. He has assistant coaches. It doesn't mean that these assistant coaches never get a say. In fact, a lot of good head coaches, if it's not their area of expertise, so for example, if they're more of an offensive coach, they will purposely hire a defensive coordinator that will take care of the majority of the defensive plays. And even during the game, the head coach may not even change a play that the defensive coordinator calls. However, at the end of the day, he's still the head coach, and he gets the final say if there's a tie, or if he hears a play called that he's not 100% sure that he likes, he can change it. But that doesn't mean that he distrusts his coordinators, or that he doesn't look at them as legitimate coaches with legitimate things to offer that are productive to the game. No, that's why he hired them, because they're competent at what they do, and a good head coach knows to trust those guys, especially in times of 4th and 10 or 4th and 1, things like the kind of these things. And the reason I bring that analogy up is that to me is at least from a guy's perspective, although there may be some ladies you love sports too, but from that perspective, that's kind of how I view Aria's role is she will tell me plays that she thinks maybe need to be called in certain areas so that I can better make a decision. And it's all, we talked about this last week, but I'll bring it up again. It's all in the presentation. It's not being disrespectful and unsubmissive to offer up information. It's how the information is offered up. If it's offered up in courtesy and in kindness and in love, as opposed to disrespect and confrontationally, there's a difference in how you offer up information. One is crossing the line, one is not.
Right. And by trying to be a quote unquote good submissive partner and trying to assume this role that was somewhat new. I mean, I feel like I've always strived to submit to you.
You
even
have.
before, but this level of submission was very new. This dynamic was very new. And so in striving to be quote unquote the perfect submissive or present my submission in the correct way, I was doing more damage because I didn't understand that submission is not silent. That doesn't mean that you don't get to have that ongoing conversation to say, this is where I'm at, this is what I need, and this is how you can help me help you. Because ultimately, when I am in my right submission, it is helpful to Coda to have me in that place where my headspace is correct, where my attitude is correct, where the actions I'm performing are coming from a place of desire to submit, not just performative submission.
And going back to what I said about how things are presented, she wants to be respectful and kind to me, which is why she said, I want you to hold me accountable. If you think that I've been unkind or disrespectful to you, I don't want to be that way, and that is something that you should call me out for. And then I realized, wait a minute, I do that in my everyday life. If someone is being demeaning or disrespectful to me as a person, as a human being, because we all deserve to be treated with respect because we're human beings, I call them out on that. So why wouldn't I do the same with my partner and vice versa? Again, this goes both ways. But that had to do with a lot of conversations and everything. And so, but so what I realized is that was coming from a place of her saying, I respect you enough as my husband to say, don't let me get away with this because you don't deserve to be treated like that. And that is not a doormat type of thing. That is from a very caring point of view from her to care enough about me to say, hold me accountable to this.
Right. And it's very, very rare, but there have been, very few occasions where I feel like you are being harsh or you're acting from a place of frustration. And
I've had those moments, believe it or not.
And I have said to you, the one that comes to mind immediately is when we had a scheduled maintenance spanking and you were being very harsh towards me that day.
Oh, I remember this. I was like, wait a minute, when was this? But I remember this now.
And I very lovingly, very respectfully called you out for having this harshness towards me and say, I don't feel comfortable proceeding with this maintenance until we talk through whatever's going on emotionally between us, because I don't want to go into this maintenance and have it go poorly because you are coming at me with a harsh attitude.
Yeah.
I don't know how, because this has never happened when there's been a punishment. So I don't know how I would proceed if that were the case.
Thank goodness no two searched that though.
But I feel like there would still have to be like, hey, I'm not trying to get out of the punishment like that. I don't weaponize your communication to say, oh, I'm not comfortable with this just because you're trying to get out of it. But I think I would have to come to you and be like, hey, I can tell that, whatever I did, it really upset you. I can tell that you're angry with me about it. Can you take some time to calm down before we proceed with punishment? Because I'm very intuitive to other people's feelings, especially Coda's. And if I feel like he is angry at me, I will respond in an emotional way and in a way that would not be productive to the punishment process. And I don't think your anger would be productive to the punishment process.
Oh, definitely not. Definitely not.
And so,
in fact, I've always said never punish out of anger. That's a really bad thing to do.
You usually make that call anyway to put it off.
Sure.
But if you were persistent on proceeding with a punishment when you were in that headspace, I would probably lovingly come to you and say, I am not trying to get out of this. I completely understand and accept that I have earned this punishment, but we need to get into a better place with each other before we can handle the punishment. And that would be appropriate.
Yeah.
Just to come back to the second point when I said I had 2 points.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, we didn't let you get to the second point.
That's okay. But just to come back to that, I think in the beginning when we were in this place of not really understanding how to communicate with each other in a productive way, I noticed, and I still do this sometimes, but I've learned how to communicate to get my needs met. I've noticed that when I was feeling dissatisfied in discipline or when I was feeling dissatisfied in your leadership, I was still submissive, but I was performing submission. So I was doing the things I was supposed to do. I was fulfilling the roles, the tasks, the things, but my attitude was not where it should be. I was doing them begrudgingly. I was doing them because it was my duty, because that was what I agreed to do. I was doing them out of obligation, not from a place of I genuinely want to submit out of a response to my admiration and respect for my partner. And I think as a submissive partner, that is the ultimate goal, is like my submission is out of respect, honor, admiration. It's a responsive submission to my partner, even when we're in disagreement, even when, my partner may be sick or busy or isn't able to give the attention into the relationship that they normally do. I still have that admiration, that respect, that honor for them, to where my submission is coming from a place of my whole being, not just, okay, I'm going to do this now and I'm going to do this. And I think that in the beginning, that's where I was, where I'm like, okay, I'll do all the things because I said I would do all the things, but I'm not fulfilled. I'm not fulfilled in this role. I'm not fulfilled in my relationship. I don't feel led.
Yeah, and to be fair, I'm sure there's still some times where you don't feel led. I'm doing a better job of that, but we're not there yet.
There are times where I notice myself getting into that negative headspace where I'm like, okay, I'll just do the things. That's usually when I come to you and say my attitude's not right. That's usually when I will request a unscheduled maintenance.
Scheduled maintenance, yeah.
Because I am very in tune to people's feelings, especially Coda's, especially family. I'm very aware of the air of our home. Coda is less so.
You said that very nice. Thank you.
He's less intuitive to how I'm feeling, what my intrinsic thought process is, what my motivations are. He looks at actions.
I will say, I don't mean this the way it's going to come out, but it is a good way to say it. Because I'm sure there's some guys where you don't fit this phrase, and I really don't like the phrase, but it's the best way to describe me. I'm a typical male in that way, where I don't pick up on subtle cues. I don't pick up on subtle hints. You have to just come out and tell me.
Which is why you appreciate the direct communication.
I want the directness because I don't see it otherwise. And it's not on purpose. Like, I try to get better at it, and I think I've gotten a little better. But there's just certain parts sometimes of your personality you can't change.
But that's why I've learned that even if I have a poor attitude, if I'm speaking to you respectfully and I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, you don't notice. So I have to come to you and be like, hey, I am having a really hard time with my motivation, and I could use some reconnection to our dynamic.
And then usually at that point, I look around and go, oh, yeah, I guess I can see that now. But it was kind of like she had to point out to me, hey, there's a snake in the road there. If you don't pay attention, you're going to get bit. And it's kind of like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I see it now. It should have been obvious, but it wasn't. But yeah, and we've talked about before how I don't mind that. I want her to do that. It's the way she goes about it, and as long as it's respectful and it's from a place of concern and kindness, I don't have a problem with it.
And so, kind of wrapping up this conversation, that is why submission can't be silent, is because your relationship requires your effort. It also requires you to be able to understand and recognize your own needs and be able to communicate those. It also requires you to receive direction and communication from your head of household to be able to take that, right? And so communication's a two-way street. I don't want to make it sound like, oh, the submissive partner is the only one communicating and the dominant partner is just fulfilling.
We're going to delve in a little bit of that in the next podcast.
Yeah, and so, it is a two-way street. The dominant partner is still the head of household. He is still the one giving direction, giving leadership. You are still coming under that leadership. You are not driving or directing or dominating the relationship by communicating. You are giving information so that they can then make informed decisions for the household.
And better lead, right? Better lead you, better lead the household. And hopefully, by doing that, then you both reach the goals that you have for your relationship and for life and your family.
And every relationship, every head of household is going to be different. So just because Coda needs that direct communication and he needs me to tell him where I am emotionally almost all the time.
That was very kind of you to say almost, because I think it's like the majority of the time. But
you're getting better. You are getting better at reading me.
But it was kind of you to say almost.
But just because that's what he needs doesn't mean that that's going to be what you need in your relationship.
Correct.
You have to tailor your communication to your relationship. But I think the important part of this whole conversation is that the communication is important. And submission is not passive and it's not silent. It's something that you have to actively participate in order to grow and develop your relationship.
I like to call it quiet strength. It's quiet strength. And that word quiet doesn't mean silent, but it just means that it is a calmness, but that doesn't mean because you are calm. Sometimes we associate strength with people being loud and almost obnoxious and in your face. But you can be strong without being those things.
And submission is coming from a place of strength.
Yes, absolutely.
Because if you are defeated, if you are broken, that's not submission. That is a red flag for abuse.
You become the doormat at that point.
Right. And so active submission, healthy submission is a form of strength. the difference is that it's not a leading strength, it's a submitting strength.
The way I would sum it up for me is that I have had someone who is a friend see Ari and I's interaction and has said, you know what, and they're a podcast listener, by the way. You know what? I wasn't 100% sure what you guys meant by this relationship. I thought perhaps it was definitely a dictator doormat type thing, but then I saw you interact, and what I realized is it is a way for you both for your love to grow and your mutual respect for one another to also grow and to be cultivated. That was the word that she used, and she said it's amazing because most relationships you see, it is the extremes. It's him towering over her, or her being so mean and disrespectful to where he's castrated. And she said, I did not see that. She said, I really saw a love between you two, a mutual respect. She was able to give you feedback. You still made a decision, but even when the decision was made, I did not once feel that she was disrespected as a person or felt made to feel less than. And that is really, I would say, how I would sum that up.
All right, guys, if you want to see this podcast in video form as well as get other bonus content, please consider becoming a member on our Patreon. The link to that is down below.
See if I have a face for radio or not.
And we will talk to you guys next time.
See you in the post show.
Bye.